column of fire and rust-red water punches 7,000 feet into the sky. On the decks of distant American warships, sailors and pilots stare in stunned silence. Over the radios, through the crackle of static, a single word is whispered, a name that was once a myth, Yamato. But that is the end. To understand it, we must go back to the beginning. 24 hours earlier. April 6, 1945. We are deep inside the steel heart of the world's largest, most powerful battleship. This isn't just a machine of war. It is a city of 3,000 men. The air is thick with the scent of lubricating oil, salt, and fresh paint. The steady hum of ventilation systems is the ship's breath, punctuated by the metallic ring of boots on steel ladders and the low murmur of sailors going about their duties. In a cramped bunk space, a young seaman carefully folds a letter to his mother, tucking it into his tunic. He knows it may never be sent. This is Yamato, not as a collection of statistics, but as a home, a workplace, and for many, a final resting place. Of course, the statistics are staggering. She is a monster of naval engineering. 9 18.1-inch guns, the largest ever mounted on a warship, capable of hurling a shell heavier than a small car over 26 miles. Her armor belt, thick enough to defy any shell from any battleship afloat, was designed with one purpose: to be unsinkable, to be the ultimate anchor of an empire's naval strategy. For years, her very existence was a closely guarded secret, a legend whispered among navies worldwide. But legends cannot stop the turning of the tide. It is April 1945. The war is lost. Okinawa is a raging inferno, the final stepping stone to the Japanese home islands. The once mighty Imperial Japanese Navy is a ghost, its carriers at the bottom of the Pacific, its fuel reserves nearly exhausted. What remains is desperation. And from this desperation comes a plan, Operation 10 Go. It's a mission born of grim poetry and military necessity. A final glorious charge. Yamato, with only enough fuel for a one-way trip, would sortie with a light escort of destroyers. Her orders: break through the overwhelming American naval and air power surrounding Okinawa, run herself aground on the island's shores, and fight until destroyed, a stationary, unsinkable fortress spitting defiance to the very end. A surface kamikaze. On the bridge, Admiral Seiichi Itō, commander of the small fleet, contemplates his sealed orders. A veteran naval officer, he understands the futility. He argued against the mission in private, calling it a waste of men and steel. But in public, his resolve is absolute. He will carry out his duty. Beside him, Captain Kōsaku Aruga reads the plan. The words one-way mission are not written, but they hang in the air, heavy and unspoken, understood by every man from the admiral down to the youngest sailor. The ghost of Yamato's sister ship, Musashi, sunk by overwhelming air attack in the Sibuyan Sea just months earlier, haunts their thoughts. They all know what is coming. The age of the battleship is over. The age of the aircraft carrier has arrived. As dusk settles, Yamato slips her moorings. Under the cover of darkness, she glides through the Bungo Strait and into the Pacific. Her escorting destroyers fan out, their stacks belching black smoke to obscure their passage. Sailors stand at their action stations. The quiet tension a stark contrast. The sun rises on two oceans at once. On the Yamato, the clatter of mess tins gives way to the thud of running feet as gunners scramble to their stations. They swarm over the gray steel, manning the countless triple-barreled Type 96 anti-aircraft guns that bristle from every surface. A forest of lethal-looking cannons. The drills are sharp, practiced, but a nervous energy hums beneath the routine. Just over the horizon, another world awakens. On the flight decks of American carriers like the Essex and the Hornet, the scene is one of controlled, overwhelming power. The massive ships turn into the wind, their decks a crowded mosaic of dark blue aircraft. Grumman Avengers, their bellies pregnant with torpedoes. Curtiss Helldivers, the dive bombers poised to strike from above. And the lethal Hellcat fighters ready to sweep the skies clean. This isn't a battle, it's an execution in waiting. And here's the brutal, unspoken truth of this morning. The Yamato, for all its size and firepower, is a blind giant. Those hundreds of anti-aircraft guns look terrifying, but they're manually aimed, a desperate attempt to throw a wall of steel into the sky. Her special beehive shells are designed to explode into a shotgun blast of smaller projectiles, but they're wildly inaccurate, more of a fireworks display than a defense. The ship's radar is primitive, a blurry, unreliable eye. Most critically, there are no friendly aircraft. Yamato is utterly alone. Meanwhile, aboard the ships of Task Force 58, the mood is clinical. Briefing rooms are packed with pilots, young men in flight suits listening intently. The lessons from the great battles in the Philippines have been learned and refined. The plan is a cold piece of geometry. The fighters will go in first, strafing the decks and anti-aircraft mounts to suppress fire and distract the gunners. Then the attack splits. Dive bombers will plummet from high altitude, forcing the gun crews to aim upwards. Simultaneously, torpedo bombers will skim the waves, coming in from one direction, the port side. The goal is precise: to hold the Yamato below the waterline on one side only, to use the ocean itself as a weapon, forcing a catastrophic list from which the giant cannot recover. There are no calls for heroics, only for procedure. It is a methodical industrial approach to destruction. Discovery was never in doubt. American submarines had been shadowing the Japanese fleet for hours, their radio signals painting a clear path for the hunters. At dawn, a reconnaissance plane from the carrier Essex makes the final, definitive contact. 1 battleship, 1 light cruiser, 8 destroyers. The report crackles. The trap is sprung. Across the task force, engines roar to life. The first strike groups are already forming up, a swarm of vengeance climbing into the morning sky. On Yamato's bridge, the reports arrive with grim formality. A submarine spotted. An enemy aircraft sighted. Vice Admiral Itō and Captain Aruga received the news with a stoicism that borders on fatalism. They made their peace with this moment long before leaving port. Down on the decks, the reality is more tangible. A young loader presses his hand against the gun shield, feeling the sun's warmth on the steel. A signalman squints at the blinding glare off the water, searching the empty horizon. A nearby destroyer begins to belch black smoke, a futile attempt to screen the battleship, but the wind tears the curtain apart as quickly as it forms. And then they appear. At first, they are just specks, tiny motes of dust against the brilliant blue, but they grow. The specks resolve into shapes, the shapes into engines and glinting wings. The low hum, the air cracks. Not with thunder, but with the shriek of falling steel. The first wave is on them. Bombs hammer against Yamato's armored deck, not piercing. But the concussion is a physical blow that travels through the solace of every sailor's feet. Around the bow, fountains of seawater, white and furious, climb 100 feet into the air, then collapse back into the ocean. The attackers are smart. They don't just fly straight in. They come from all directions, forcing the gunnery officers to make impossible choices. Split the fire and weaken the defense? Or focus on one group and let the others get through? On the anti-aircraft platforms, the gunners are deafened. The constant, deafening roar of the 25mm guns makes their ears ring, their teeth ache. Barrels glow cherry red, overheating from the continuous fire. Streams of red tracers stitch across the sky, a frantic, desperate attempt to connect with the fast-moving specks, but mostly, they just paint patterns on empty air. Then come the beehive shells, the Sanchikidan, fired from the main guns. They'd burst into a spectacular, terrifying firework display of shrapnel and incendiary tubes, designed to create a wall of steel. It looks impressive, a cloud of black smoke and glittering death, but the American pilots are already wise to it. They fly around the bursts, through the gaps, undeterred. Then the white lines appear, carving V-shaped wakes through the dark sea. Torpedoes. They come in waves, a wolfpack tactic designed to overwhelm. The pilots coordinate, launching their deadly fish from different angles, but targeting the same flank, the port side. The first hit is a gut-wrenching shudder, a deep, grinding groan that feels like the ship itself is in pain. Then another. And another. Each impact is a catastrophic event. Below decks, the lights flicker and die. Damage control parties, heroes in the dark, wade through ankle-deep water slick with fuel oil. The ship begins to list, tilting dangerously to port. Orders are barked through the speaking tubes. Counterflood starboard compartments. Valves are spun by burned, blistered hands, intentionally letting seawater into the other side of the ship to fight the list, to bring the giant back to an even keel. It's a desperate, calculated gamble, trading one form of drowning for another. Beyond Yamato, her escorts are dying. The light cruiser Yahagi, a graceful ship, takes a torpedo amidships. She staggers, slows, and then lies still in the water, smoke pouring from her wounds. A destroyer, The Yukikaze is blown open, her back broken by a direct bomb hit. She vanishes in a blossom of flame and smoke. Another destroyer, the Fuyutsuki, doubles back through the chaos, her guns still firing as she lays a thick smokescreen, a futile attempt to hide the wounded giant. Later, she will return, not to fight, but to rescue the men swimming in the oily water. On Yamato's bridge, the command staff is a study in control. Admiral Itō stands motionless, his face an expressionless mask, watching the destruction unfold. Captain Aruga's orders are clipped, precise, stripped of all emotion. Hard to starboard! Full speed ahead! The helmsman fights the wheel, his knuckles white. The ship feels different now, sluggish, heavy. She no longer responds with the crispness of a thoroughbred. She feels like a wounded animal, tired and slow to obey. But the power is still there, immense and defiant. A full salvo from the 18-inch main guns fires not at the planes, but at the distant ships they can't even see. The blast is biblical. It feels like the ocean itself shudders, the deck plates vibrating with a power that seems capable of tearing the world apart. Yet it's a gesture of futility. The shells arc for miles, but they cannot touch the ever-shrinking specks of the attacking planes. For a moment, there's a flicker of triumph. A single Avenger, caught in a web of flak, loses control. It trails black smoke, spiraling down, and cartwheels into the sea in a brilliant splash of spray and flame. A cheer goes up from the gun crews, a brief, defiant roar. But it's erased almost immediately. On the horizon, a new formation of dots is growing larger. The next wave is already here. The list to port returns, worse this time. The counterflooding can't keep up. The sea erupts. Torpedo wakes like white scars streak toward Yamato's port side. On the bridge, binoculars tremble in steady hands. Hard to starboard, full rudder. The helmsman spins the wheel, his knuckles white, the massive ship groaning as it struggles to answer. Too late. 3 distinct, brutal shocks shudder through the hull, throwing men off their feet. The deck lurches violently to port. Counter-flood starboard voids 1 through 5. Now! Aruga's voice cuts through the rising chaos. The desperate ballet of survival begins. A race against water, a gamble with physics. Every ton of seawater deliberately let in on the starboard side is a prayer to bring the ship back to an even keel. For a moment, it seems to work. The terrifying list eases from 20 degrees back to 10, then 5. A collective, unspoken sigh of relief hangs in the air, but it's fleeting. The sea is relentless. Another wave of American aircraft, Avengers and Helldivers, peels off from the clouds. They don't swarm like angry wasps. They are a conveyor belt of destruction. Calm, disciplined, they dive, aim low for the waterline, release their deadly payloads, and climb away. No glory-seeking, just cold, drilled efficiency. Survive, rearm, return. Another series of dull, gut-wrenching thuds reverberates from below. The ship staggers again, this time worse. The counterflooding has reached its limit. There are no more voids to fill. The list to port returns, steeper and more stubborn than before. On the bridge, Aruga stares at the nautical charts spread before him. Okinawa, the beach. It's a phantom of hope, a desperate dream of running the magnificent vessel aground, turning her into an unsinkable fortress. But the dream dissolves against the harsh reality of the charts and the damage reports flooding in. Too far, too slow. Too wounded, the navigator confirms his fears. Captain, we've lost steering control. Aft engine rooms report flooding, they're abandoning the space. The lights flicker and die in whole sections of the ship. One by one, the arteries of the giant are severed. The list increases past 15 degrees, the critical angle where the massive main gun turrets can no longer train their barrels toward the enemy. The pride of the Imperial Navy, silenced. Through the smoke and the spray, the smaller destroyers, Yukikaze among them, dart in and out of the maelstrom. They are like loyal terriers defending a dying lion, laying smoke screens that are instantly shredded by shrapnel, their anti-aircraft guns barking defiantly at the sky. They circle back through water boiling with explosions, their crews witnessing the agony of their flagship. On Yamato's own canted decks, a new kind of struggle unfolds. Sailors with axes hack at the lashings of life rafts, a futile effort against the inevitable. The sea around the ship is already a slick of burning oil and fuel, a death trap for anyone who enters it. Below decks, in the twilight world of passageways tilted like funhouse corridors, a petty officer finds a young sailor, barely a boy, frozen in terror on a ladder. He doesn't shout. He grabs the boy's arm, his grip firm, and guides him upward against the flow of men escaping the flooded compartments below. An act of simple humanity in the heart of inhumanity. Then, a strange, terrible stillness descends. The roar of the American engines fades as they regroup for the next assault. The thunder of the ship's own guns is gone. For a few seconds, the only sounds are the crackle of fires crawling into supposedly watertight compartments and the rhythmic, almost gentle slap of waves against the steel hull. An order begins to form on the lips of officers. Prepare to abandon ship. But many know there is nowhere to go. The deck is now a steep, slippery slope. Water, green and greedy, pours over the port railings, washing across the deck not in waves, but as a constant rising river. A report comes from damage control. Magazine temperatures are rising. Sir, rapidly. High above, the final wave of aircraft lines up. They see a crippled giant, heeled far over, her red belly exposed like a wounded. The roll accelerates, a 90-degree list that becomes an inversion. Men who just seconds ago stood on a deck now tumble down a steel cliff, sliding past anti-aircraft guns and shattered superstructure. Below, in the heart of the ship, the sea finds what it's looking for. White-hot boilers, ruptured steam lines, and catastrophically, the 4 powder magazines. A deep guttural rumble begins, a thunderhead building from within. For a heartbeat, there is only this internal groan. Then a flash. An apocalyptic eruption of fire and force rips the world's mightiest battleship in two. A pillar of fire, smoke, and debris climbs 6 kilometers into the sky, a horrifying, magnificent funeral pyre visible for over 100 miles. For the American pilots circling above, the Japanese rescuers miles away, and the desperate men in the water, the sight is biblical. The sound is not heard but felt, a concussion that vibrates through the ribs and the very hull of distant ships. A wave of heat washes over the sea, which is instantly transformed into a black, viscous hell of fuel oil, splintered wood, and the bobbing heads of men. Into this maelstrom, a handful of Japanese destroyers cautiously advance. Leading them is the famously lucky Yukikaze. Her crew lowers nets and ropes, leaning over the side to pull shivering, oil-choked, and horribly burned sailors from the toxic water. The scale of the loss is staggering, tallied without fanfare. Of the 3,332 men who sailed on Yamato fewer than 300 will see another sunrise. The fleet's commander, Vice Admiral Seiichi Itō, and the ship's captain, Kōsaku Aruga, chose their fate, tying themselves to the binnacle to go down with their vessel, a final somber act of samurai tradition. On the American side, the radio traffic is sober, professional. Reports crackle back to the carriers. Battleship confirmed sunk. It was not a cost-free victory. 10 aircraft were lost, a dozen pilots and crewmen gone, their own small tragedies swallowed by the larger event. But the strategic reality was undeniable. The world's greatest battleship, the pinnacle of naval gunnery and armor, never fired its main guns at an enemy ship. It never reached the shores of Okinawa to become the unsinkable fortress of its final desperate orders. It met a new doctrine, an industrial juggernaut, and a sky black with carrier-borne aircraft. The age of the battleship, an era defined by titans dueling on the high seas, was over. Air power had fundamentally